I assume they will be along very shortly. We will go ahead, though, and call the school board workshop for the CARES funds and one implementation to order on Tuesday, April 20th. Dr. Pace, we're turning it to you.
Thank you, Chairman Thacker. I'm actually going to turn it over to the team. We're going to start tonight with the presentation regarding the one-to-one systems readiness and implementation plan. We've talked briefly about this at our last budget workshop in terms of where we felt like we would recommend that we go with a major aspect of our CARES dollars. And then the team will talk about the full CARES piece. We had already at that budget workshop kind of talked high level about CARES 2. And this then would take us a little bit further, but we will be at the board meeting tonight seeking support from the board for implementation of these plans. I really do believe that our one-to-one initiative is a critical piece of keeping us competitive with others in the Central Florida area and actually on the national level, and keeping an expectation for parents and students coming into our community to have ready access to devices. But it's also a great time for us to maximize the work that we've done over the course of the last year to be effective with digital teaching and learning. But Mr. Thorne and his team have put together a full comprehensive analysis of not just about buying a bunch of devices. It's about making sure that we have the support systems in place, the training in place, the implementation plan in place, so that use of those devices gives us the greatest bang for our buck in terms of a truly positive impact on students' learning and what they can do in the future. Mr. Thorne?
Good afternoon, board. Good afternoon, Dr. Pace and executive staff. I want to let you know that you have two documents that you were provided. One is the PowerPoint document that I'm going to go over shortly, and the other is a document that's much larger than the PowerPoint was distilled from. So I'm going to start with the one-to-one system readiness and implementation plan. There are several items that need to be considered when implementing a one-to-one technology program. It includes planning, leadership, funding, infrastructure, professional development, instruction, evaluations, and of course sustainability. So the following is a systems readiness assessment summary of these technology systems, the status of these systems in 2020-2021 school year, recommendations and funding sources that are in place that need to be considered to move forward with the successful implementation of the one-to-one technology initiative. So my teams reviewed many different areas regarding this initiative. So we reviewed servers and storage, network, the wireless network, the internet, hardware management, classroom technology, our use of Canvas, which is anonymous, internal support, policies and procedures, applications, facilities, additional staffing, additional hardware, and additional software applications. So I put a description of what infrastructure means to us. So the term infrastructure includes all the wiring equipment that connects our systems together in the district. But it also includes all the servers, computers, policies, security, applications, and of course the staff that are part of building a system for supporting a one-to-one project for the school district of Osceola County. So I want to give a little history lesson here a little bit. So this builds on current initiatives. So when I say that, I mean, what are we doing to fit all these pieces together that I just talked about? It not only involves resources, it involves accessibility, devices, and connectivity. That's the infrastructure piece. But more importantly, it involves our leadership for the initiative, it involves our teachers, it involves the students and the assessments that they're going to go through during this initiative. So it involves teaching and learning, collaboration between teaching and learning and information technology to get this initiative off the ground. So what is our current state? So we have one-to-one initiatives currently in New York City and Discovery Intermediate School. Also, we have implemented one-to-one with kindergartners with iPads, third graders with laptops, and sixth graders with laptops. And these devices have been delivered or are in the hands of students. So for these initiatives, we developed an implementation plan that we will use and modify for the overall plan. So we listed lessons learned from these initiatives. And also, one may ask, how are you going to perform refresh for this in future years? So we build device refresh into our future capital funding, years 1 to 5 and years 6 to 10, to make sure our devices are replaced in an appropriate manner. Additional staffing. So like I said, I'm kind of jumping forward here to the staffing piece, but do know that in this document, there is very detailed information about the other areas that were listed. So additional staffing, so media and instructional technology. So you're aware of our green shirts. That is what I'm referring to here. We're proposing adding 15 new green shirts, which will be equally spread across the schools based on population for support. We currently have 4 existing green shirts, so this would be 15 in addition. Also, for media instructional technology, we will be adding 1 network specialist and 2 asset managers because of the number of devices that we're now running for the district that we're maintaining. We're adding over 20,000 new devices for this initiative. So that's a total of 18 staff in media instructional technology. Technology services, it would be 10 additional network specialists to support these devices and computer support. We would add an additional help desk operator, 1 additional asset manager, and 1 project manager to help with this initiative. So that's 13 staff in that area. Information services, we would add 1 additional program analyst to maintain and care and feed the Canvas application. And then we would add a contractor, which would be temporary, 2 program analysts for our business intelligence initiative, and 2 program analysts for our data warehouse that we're reimagining. So that would be actually a total of 1 permanent staff member in information services. And then at the actual division level, we'd be adding 1 director of information network security, which was already approved on a prior board meeting and has been advertised. Also under that position, we will have 2 network communication analysts. So because we're adding so many devices to the infrastructure of the district, we need to have staff that's going to perform device end user testing and device testing to make sure that we are complying with our security measures here in the district. And also I'm proposing the addition of a coordinator of computer support to help image these devices and maintain these devices at a technology services level. Next page. Additional hardware. So as you would imagine, this initiative is going to require a heavy lift from an infrastructure point of view. So as I stated, we're adding 19,500 additional laptops, Dell laptops. We will be adding almost 2,800 additional iPads for first graders and kindergartners. In addition, we'll be adding actual infrastructure in our data center, which is wireless controllers. We're going to be performing a wireless assessment, which is already underway. We're going to be adding additional access points at the school to support all the devices at the schools themselves that we're adding. So imagine that right now we're a 2-to-1 district. What that means is 2 students for every device. We're going to be moving up to 1-to-1. So we're in effect doubling the number of devices in a classroom that have to be supported on a wireless network.
Can I ask a question on
Yes,
that?
sir.
That adds up to 39,000. How is that a 1-to-1?
Because yes, sir, Mr. Thacker, we already have devices in the district that are already deployed.
No, I get that, but you said we were at a 1-to-2.
No, we're at a 2-to-1.
We're 2-to-1, which must mean we're doubling the number, and you're looking at buying 19.5. So there must be another 19.5 out there, right?
So what's baked into this is refresh that has to occur. So we have some older laptops that are out there that are going out of service that have to be replaced. So
That seems worse to me.
I'm sorry, sir.
That seems worse to me because I'm not getting but 40,000 laptops in total here. And some of those you say are replacing ones that are going out. Don't we have more than 40,000 students?
We have district-wise, we have over 50,000 students.
Right, so that's, I'm not following how we get to 50,000, I guess,
Understood. So,
on the
I
map.
said 2 to 1, that was an approximate number. So
Okay.
it's different at different schools. So we do have some schools that are already 1 to 1. We also have grade levels that are already 1 to 1. So I can get exact breakdowns.
If, as long as they're covered, I'm fine, I don't want us to do all this and be 5,000 short.
We will not be short, sir.
Okay.
Now, is there a survey if people already have a laptop?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Is there a survey of how many people actually have a laptop? Or even if you have a laptop, like for instance, I can get a laptop to my son, I don't
Are
know the
you
district to
referring
ride.
to like a BYOD situation or your own device situation? So we know that during the spring of last year, when we handed out laptops, there was approximately 32% of the folks did not ask for a device. So we can infer from that some of those folks already have laptops. We know that some folks attempted to use their phones, which was not successful during that period. So they did come back in to ask for devices. So we ended up passing out over 17,000 devices to folks. So you can infer from that the number of students who did have a device, they were able to use a phone. Now, whether that's their device or their parents' device or what have you.
No, because I'm just piggybacking off what the chairman was saying, because one-to-one, are we trying to provide one-to-one regardless? Or are we saying, hey, one-to-one, subtracting the students that already have a device at home? So if there's 10,000 people that already have it, we don't have to buy 10,000 and make it redundant, and they basically have 2 laptops.
So part of this initiative is moving away from being an BYOD district or regular device district to a district-wide where we provide the actual devices if they want. So if a child decides they don't want a device, then they're gonna have to make sure that that device meets all of our specifications in our network.
Like all the preloaded apps
Especially
too
in
and
the
things like that.
district, you know, when they're bringing it into the classroom. You have to make sure that we're able to run our filters. Content Keeper is one of our web filters. They have to make sure that runs, that they're able to really all the drivers and devices and applications that are required for that class. So there would have to be an assessment of that. So we're moving from a position here that we were going to be using district devices for the students.
I think Ms. Castillo's got a question for you too.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the average prices of these devices, is this retail price or are we looking for education partnership with these
So this-
vendors?
Right, so this is through Dell, the first line item, which is the devices themselves. So that is the contracted amount that we have through Dell, less $5. So we are saving $5 off of that price currently, based on the volume and quantity that we're purchasing.
Okay, so this is our education program,
That's correct.
okay.
Yeah.
The same with Apple?
Same thing with Apple.
Got it, thank
And the
you.
Apple number, the 379 includes Apple Care in that.
Oh, I like it.
We may decide to go with a different warranty company, so which would reduce those prices by $79. If we decide to do that, that's not been decided yet.
Okay.
Okay.
Will it
Kind
be
of
the
did
same
this
level
from a
of
worst
care
case
though?
scenario.
Yeah,
I did do that on the worst case.
okay, so these are the highest prices. I suppose since we are asking questions, and I'm gonna try not to interrupt you again.
You can ask me.
Well, I want you to get through the presentation. The salaries that we have here, is this high-end salaries or median
These are
end?
median salaries.
Okay, so there is a possibility that
Could be less, could be more.
depending on the person, they may have a lot of qualifications, they may go a little higher?
That's correct, it's a possibility.
Okay,
I would say for the record information, network security is on the high end
okay,
for us.
thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Turn right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Thorne,
Yes, sir.
so essentially the investment's gonna be $20 million. Do you know what the recurring cost is gonna be for this?
Yes, so I did refer to that regarding refresh for the devices. So that would be the major cost over time, years 1 through 10. So we know that we have older Dell devices, which we call 3189s, which are coming up for refresh or have to be replaced because they have reached a certain age in the district. So we're gonna have to replace those. So we've built those costs into the capital refresh plan for years 1 through 10, which I can provide a complete breakdown of that if you like.
Do you have like a number, an idea, an annual number
It's gonna be around $2.5 million.
each year for the next 10 years?
Next 7 years, we only go out 7 years, so.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Bass?
So we have decided that our devices can refresh every 7 years, is what we do.
Easy
But
question.
we've already had some in the district that already are coming up for refresh. So that is the number we built in. It could be more, it could be less. It depends on the exact number that has to be replaced.
Mr. Bass has a question.
Easy question. You may not know the answer to this, but do you know if T-Mobile have they expanded their coverage? Because we still have a lot of areas in my district that along Nova Road, Yeehaw, they don't have any.
Yes, sir. So a couple meetings ago, actually, it was asked for, I believe, by Mr. Osceola asked for a coverage map. So I did provide that.
Oh, did you?
And
Okay,
it
my
was
mistake.
sent by Dr. Pace. So what's cool about T-Mobile, they were able to provide the coverage area by school in that document. So I'd be happy to send it again if you need to see it. But it lays out by school and area what their coverage is. So, and it's pretty good. They gave percentages of coverage and so on. So there could be students who are missed, which goes back to what Mr. Arguello asked about a couple board meetings ago. In that case, those students, if they don't have internet connectivity in their home for some reason, there are other Spectrum hotspot locations they could go to or other T-Mobile hotspot locations. And they could do their work there, they could go to the school to do it, or if they were disconnected for some reason, say through Spectrum, say the family was on hard times, they couldn't pay the bill. Spectrum does have a program which we're a part of, or almost a part of, we're still working through some details, where they will allow us to pay for their connection into Spectrum again, so no questions asked. It will be done through the foundation.
Thank
Hopefully
you.
that answers your question.
And my apologies if I overlooked that particular doc. It's not like they've been getting just a few papers a day,
Yeah, we did provide
It was a while ago.
very detailed T-Mobile coverage map and a Spectrum coverage map too.
Okay, thank you.
We have one more question for you, Mr. Melinda. Are you done, Robert?
I'm done, yes.
Mr. Melinda, don't move it, move it here.
And the last thing is, what about the bandwidth itself? Because now if everybody has a laptop and everybody's getting on the network at the same time, are we having to go to T1 to T1000 or something like that? I mean, what's the next level of,
So-
is enough what we got there sufficient to provide,
Yes. So
good?
we've been preparing for this, not knowing that it was going to be coming or not. So in our last contract with Spectrum, we did allow for 24 gigabits connections at the district level. So that's what's coming in the pipe here. And then we have core locations around the district. We have 3 core locations. One at Toho, one at Liberty, and, pardon me? Who's the other one? Oh, the district, I'm sorry, Alpha. So we call them Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie Core. So is what we have, and they have connections coming in there that then go out to the schools through Metro Ethernet connections. So yes, part of this plan was to do that assessment and to add additional access points to be able to handle that.
Yeah, so is that budgeted, or we're gonna add that to the, has that been budgeted here as a line item, or we have to
We've
add
already
that?
taken care of it. So we have the ability to do that. In fact, in the data center, we're gonna be adding 40 gigabit connectors. Right now they're 10, but in preparation for this, we're gonna be adding 40 gigabit. Yes, which will be more than capable to handle this situation. So that was one of the things we wanted to do because we were worried about this coming, not worried, but anticipating this coming, and we wanted to be prepared for it. So we did build that, bake that into the last contract we did with Spectrum. And we've been working with each school to make sure they have the connection speed to be able to handle this. So for example, each high school has 2 gigabit connections right now. we more than doubled the capacity that we had at the schools originally in the last contract. But we had to do, Spectrum had to come in and actually do hardware changes in preparation for it, and those are all completed now, including out at Celebration, which is traditionally the hardest place to look at because they have their own provider that you have to work with.
Good, Julius?
Yes, sir. I'm good.
Mr. Alvarado?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Thorne, do you know when these kids will have the devices in hand?
Yes, so it's not gonna be for the beginning of school. It's just too heavy of a lift. It's gonna be in the October, November timeframe when we would finally complete delivery of these devices.
That will be the completion date, so they'll be phased in from the beginning of
That's
school
correct.
to October.
So my plan is, if this is approved, we're gonna go ahead and do an initial purchase of devices for next year's incoming kindergartners, third graders, and sixth graders, just to get that going. And then we will follow on with the rest of the grades. High school obviously is gonna be the most challenging implementation here.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We can let you go on.
Okay, great questions, thank you. Okay, so, and there's some other esoteric items here, laptop cases, that's something that is a necessity if you want to have warranty insurance, so we have to have those cases. Same thing with Apple iPad cases. We are doing additional hotspots from T-Mobile because we're increasing the number of students who are going to have devices. We're going to be adding almost 5,000 hotspots in case they're needed. And then warranties for laptops, iPads. And another item we really need to do is add audio enhancement in every classroom in the district. So newer schools had audio enhancement in place in those classrooms initially, but we need to go and finish that at all the other schools. Because that's an important item. All right, additional, can you go back on this? Professional development. So additional professional development, this is very specific to Canvas training. So there's 3 types of Canvas training, and this PO has already been completed because we're moving forward with Canvas anyway. But I wanted to make sure it was part of this plan to let you know how important it is. So if we're gonna have digital devices, we also need to have digital curriculum, and we need to have a digital way of delivering it in the classroom. So that delivery mechanism is going to be Canvas as the learning management system. And if we ever need to move out of the classroom for whatever reason, we're still going to use Teams as the video delivery platform. So Teams has now become the standard by which Canvas is going to deliver that instruction off campus if it's needed. So there's 3 types of training. We're going to have train the trainer, which is actually adoption consulting. So our vision is we're going to have folks who are champions at each school and department for Canvas, who then will be the go-to folks to be able to answer questions. The other is Canvas general training or orientation training that everyone will take, and that's already being scheduled through various PDs for teachers, staff, and so on. And then the other one that's extremely important is instructional design consulting. And that is something we're actually trying to get stood up to happen next week. And that is where folks will build learning objects and build content inside of Canvas directly instead of doing it in our SharePoint site like we do today. It's going to be done directly into that application. Additional software. So obviously for an initiative this important, there's going to have to be some additional software that we purchase. So because we're adding so many devices, we need to have agentless device security or endpoint security for those devices. So we're going to go with a company called Armis for that. Also, we need to increase our access management capabilities. So we're going to use identity automation for that. And then basically what that is getting folks into our systems quicker. So that instead of taking 2 or 3 days to provision a teacher and getting them teaching, it's going to take 1 day to get that done. So to do that, though, we have to automate those systems. So that's one of the big things I've been pushing here is getting away from manual manual processes that occur across the district and automating them as much as possible.
Does it connect to Active Directory, or we're not gonna use Active Directory?
It is it will still have Active Directory. This is just revisioning into that. So basically, in a high level nutshell, what happens today, someone gets entered into terms, say a teacher, and then once that's all verified, and then through our systems gets pushed down through Forefront Identity Management, we call it FIM, into Active Directory. And then that spreads out to all the other systems and applications.
So if we change the rules in Active Directory, then it can reject the identity management itself. So it goes back and forth, right? So it feeds into Active Directory, and if we make changes to Active Directory, does it push back out to the input?
It may do that in some cases. I'd have to see exactly what that situation would be. But in general, our ERP system or terms is the one that controls staffing. Focus, our SIS system, is the one that controls students. So it's a two-way street there, the way we're pushing data. And that would still exist. It's just going to be a quicker, more automated methodology. Then we're going to be using NetRef for our classroom management system. So if we're adding all these devices, we got to be able to keep track of what the students are doing in the classroom. So this will allow that. We have used Land School in the past on a limited fashion, but NetRef is much more capable in this regard. And then we need to move away from using Destiny as our device management system and use something more modern. And what we're looking at is Archibus. It's the same application that Orange County uses for this endeavor in their district. All right, project deliverables. So we need to develop an interoperability solution or process map for this. We need to prepare for staffing increases for all areas. Specifically in information technology. We need to develop governance for this. And what does it mean to implement a one-to-one digital learning platform? We need to develop requirement documents, process maps. We need to have an OCM process, organizational change management. How are we going to let everyone know about this, that this is coming? Again, procedural documentation and a roadmap. So again, I touched on this earlier, but the current state. So back in 2019, the chief of staff at that time directed Discovery and Intermediate School implementation team to visit other districts. So we went to OCPS to benchmark against existing one-to-one implementations. Dr. Fritz then charged the team to develop an SDOC specific concept, which we did. And we built a business case for one-to-one, and we successfully launched Discovery's one-to-one in August of 2019. We actually did that in 4 months, which was kind of cool. So the long-term goal of this project is to have devices for all students in the district and a digital curriculum. So it's one thing to say every child's going to have a device, but what are they going to do with it, right? So we have to have digital curriculum for that. We need to, and it has to be more than just PDFs. Right, that they're looking at and what teachers are using to build the curriculum. So again, the original pilot included 2 schools and 1,300 students, and today we've rolled it out to kindergarten, 3rd, and 6th, additional 11,000 students. So as the rollout increases the number of students and devices, the strain on the district will require well-defined processes, policies, and governance of IT systems. And a governance system for managing processes and performance of the systems. So challenges are many. We're going to have a tight timeline, which means we have to have a precise execution of the project plan. Currently, a measurement system to monitor this process capability does not exist. So we need to identify key indicators of process performance and provide checkpoints to monitor these processes and to report to the board how successfully this is going. We're going to have to develop a long-term strategy for collecting and responding to feedback. In addition, completing the technology infrastructure requires additional ongoing funding to continue to expand the capacity of the district to effectively curate and deploy content. So in other words, we're going to keep growing as a district. We need to build the school, not just build the school, but also make sure we have the IT infrastructure in place to deal with that, including the devices. And then We need to actively engage curriculum instruction, teaching and learning, student support, and subject matter experts to provide cross-functional approaches that will include and consider key customers, which are students, teachers, and so on, stakeholders in developing, implementing, and sustaining quality processes for this one-to-one implementation. So next steps, we have to complete the capability analysis with the team, so we are actually well on our way to doing that. We have to develop a roadmap, identify those high-level goals and objectives for the one-to-one initiative. I feel we need to complete a risk assessment. What if we don't make that October date? What are we going to do? What's our backup plan? We have to develop action plans for deployment and training. We're already down the road with Canvas, so we're working on that. Complete a stakeholder commitment analysis. We have to identify the voice of the customer strategies. So that would involve Dana's team and making sure we get the right organizational change management in place. We need to develop measurement plans to monitor processes and, of course, develop a sustainability plan. So all of this revolves around governance. We have to have governance in place to do this. So I've provided a very, very high-level timeline spanning from April, from actually today, with the board approval, hopefully, and the project kickoff, all the way through October of 2021. So I kind of jumped through time there quickly. But in October 2021, the idea is to complete device delivery and start a one-to-one project review, how did it go? And then we need to continue with ongoing projects that have spun off from this. So in your larger document, there's a list of projects that we've identified that at the end of that document that will spin off from this particular initiative. So conclusions and recommendations.
Pete, before you move on,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Page, you good?
I just wanted to share with the board, as a result, Sarah was giving me some answers. We are currently budgeting $3.2 million out of operational budget for refresh for student computers. So we've had that built into school budgets as we move forward, and about 6.5 of our for technology infrastructure. About half of that comes from our ad valorem, and about half of that comes from the 2016 half-penny sales tax initiative. So we've had some of those dollars and plans already in place. We're not starting from scratch, but those are critical questions for the long-term success. And just wanted to make the board fully aware of that, just for clarity.
Dr. Case, I believe 1.1 million of that was dedicated to New York City also, so just to make that clear. Right, so conclusions and recommendations. So additional required project steps, we have to do a risk assessment, which I mentioned, get that stakeholder commitment. You have to have a measurement plan, a sustainability plan. You need to develop whose roles and responsibilities these are, and complete a communication plan for this project. So, and I'll read the last page. As the school district of Osceola County moves towards providing learning environments to support student learning and provide access and tools to our students and staff, we need to provide a technology infrastructure that supports this initiative that is always available and can be scaled as our needs grow. The recommendations and funding items in the previous tables provide an overview of systems that need to be considered to move forward with our one-to-one project. Thank you.
Ms. Castillo, I believe, has a question for you, and then Mr. Melendez.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. First of all, great presentation, very thorough. You've really thought about a lot of things that go with a rollout like this. Is a huge rollout, and I know there's a lot of pressure, but you did a really great job of presenting it, as well as talking us through what the different aspects of the project are going to be. My question is with regards to the instructional design. I'm not sure if this is a question for you or for someone else on our team. It states that we are going to have instructional design train the trainer, is that correct?
So there's three parts to that training. So there's one basic orientation training.
Yes.
So we have purchased from Canvas 14 of those sessions, which are 90 minutes each.
Okay, so thank you. I'm just
Yes.
gonna break that down in my head. I apologize for interrupting you. I just have to break it down. So the first option, so the first section, the adoption consulting, is that what you're talking about? This is gonna be online?
Right, so I probably should forward those differently. So everything's virtual.
Yes,
All
okay,
these
great.
trainings are virtual. So we did purchase, like I said, 14 Canvas orientation training sessions, each are 90 minutes. So the plan right now is next week we're gonna have one of those, one or two of those in use next week to provide initial training for our resource teachers and a number of other folks who are going to join in too, just to get them used to the system, because a lot of folks have not seen Canvas yet. Some have, like all our CTE people are very familiar with Canvas.
Yeah.
All the folks in New York City, extremely familiar with Canvas. But the general population of staff is not. So you're gonna have that orientation training from a teacher point of view, from a student point of view, and from an administrator point of view. When I say administrator, I mean the folks who are developing content. Okay, so there's three types of that training. Then the second training you mentioned was the adoption consulting, which is train the trainer. So that's where we have to identify the champions in each school and department to assign that training, that particular type of training. Those are the go-to people that teachers will go to, or staff in a department, to say, what am I doing here?
So these are our SMEs essentially?
Correct.
Okay.
And then the third type of training, and the one that's most interesting, I think, is the instructional design piece.
Yes.
So today, in fact, we had a meeting about this yesterday in teaching and learning. We need to determine how are we going to curate this digital curriculum? How are we going to build this digital curriculum? So today, when we do this in SharePoint, it's PDFs or Word documents that are converted into PDFs. And they may have links into them or something like that. But that's what the teachers do, is to build their courses around inside of Teams today. So I think we've agreed as a district that we don't want PDFs and Word documents. And now I'm talking for teaching and learning, so I apologize. But we don't want PDFs and Word documents as what we're building our curriculum off of. We want to use Canvas to do this. So Canvas is rich in learning objects. We have 160,000 learning objects. All of our vendors have their own content and curriculum that we can use. So Canvas, without getting too detailed, has the ability to integrate with those vendors. McGraw-Hill, HMH, Pearson, and so on. All of our vendors who provide content. So we're able to use common cartridges to get that data out of those systems and to build these courses. So we'll have a tier 1 level that the resource teachers will build in curriculum and instruction, and then the higher tiers will be used by the teachers to present information in the classroom.
Yeah, that was my question. When you said instructional design, I'm like, are we training all of our teachers on how to be instructional designers?
We are not.
But we're not.
We are not.
Like that takes years.
We're going to keep
Okay.
that control over that. So
I understand. They're just gonna see the,
that's the initial plan. It could change.
Okay, sure.
And this is a very great question, by the way, that you asked. So that is one of the projects that's spinning off from this, right? So we're not just giving kids laptops.
right,
What are we going to do with them? So, and that's a part of it. How are we going to build this digital curriculum? And we can take it another step and say, how are we going to build a personalized learning environment for them,
got it.
right? So in that way, they can stretch and grow in classes maybe beyond what the teacher is teaching and not become static in those classes. So that's
No,
my explanation.
that was a great explanation. Thank you. I'll go ahead and yield my time. I do have other questions, but I'm sure I can connect with you guys later for that.
Sure.
Yes,
Julius?
it's 4:40.
Yeah, and my question was leaning towards the same thing, which was the learning component of it. Now, are we leaning towards using ebooks and not using textbooks at all? And if that is something that we're looking at, I'm still leery of a math book being completely online. Because sometimes kids need to work out the worksheets, and so what are we doing? Are we just completely e-booking? Are we making exceptions for classes like math?
If I may add, no, we're not. We're looking at creating a balance between the face-to-face piece and the digital piece. And that's part of an envisioning group that I'm working with at this point to determine the ideas as to how that looks. As Pete mentioned, we're going to have content design training next week to start the whole process. And the content of the cups will live in Canvas. And some of it will be static and then some of it will come alive as we get more and more training. So it's not the total delivery system. There will be face-to-face, but the cups will live in Canvas, and teachers will use them to teach their lessons.
Exactly, and that sounds good too, and because the other component of that is, to what degree can we use like outside apps? Because like you said, there's a seamless between Canvas, because I went to Valencia and we use Canvas. And like you said, it could link together with McGraw-Hill, but what if there's like a cool learning app? I think one of them, Dr. Respa showed one of the kids dancing and things like that. So is part of that thinking including external vendors that can just load straight on the computer without being tied to Canvas, to be able to enhance the curriculum itself?
As Mr. Thorne had said, there are these integration
Yes, it's called
cartridges.
LTI, it's called Learning Tools Interoperability. So most vendors have it. So for example, Flipgrid, which we use for our open houses, for example, has an LTI common cartridge that you can integrate directly into Canvas. So a lot of these tools have that capability, and we would be wise to make full use of those. And what's going to happen is, as we build this cup information in Canvas, it's going to end up in what's called the Canvas Commons. We'll come up with a fancy name for it for SDOC. We'll call it SDOC Commons or something like that. But that's where everything will live, and the teachers will be able to go there and say, oh, I'm teaching Latin 1 this year. I need to go find my Latin content, right? And pull it out from my lessons. So that's kind of how that's going to work. That's the high level vision. So.
And I guess my last question specifically pertaining to that, when I went to Valencia again, doing the Canvas portion too, each professor, recorded some videos too, and we talked about that before. I call it YouTube video, but just kind of video like introducing themselves or describing particular content that's always difficult, when you hit harder sections of the class. So are we looking towards incorporating that into the curriculum as well?
Absolutely.
That's it, yep.
Are we engraving the seal in these devices?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Engraving, how are we going to, engraving the seal, or how are we going to identify that they're ours?
That's a great question. So we have the capability to do engraving. We did not put that in this plan. We looked at that last spring, and it was cost prohibitive at that time. So it's something we definitely can revisit to look at. But we're barcoding our stuff right now, and parents have to sign a form electronically or through paper that they're borrowing the device, and it has to be returned.
I know we ran into some glitches this past year where there was that paper that was filled out, parent returned it, it was misplaced, it wasn't recorded, and then someone else had to send, it was a mess, so I just.
You're correct about that.
Okay.
And that's something we've been pursuing and trying to fix. So we definitely can revisit the engraving piece and continue.
Okay.
So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
John?
If you can barcode it, that's just good.
Engraving is elegant. It does reduce it can reduce the surplus value of it because it's been engraved. But in a lot of cases, we can just remove the front cover off and then surplus it that way. That's typically what those vendors ask us to do. So,
Gotcha, okay.
I know, for example, in Orange County, they vacillate back and forth between engraving and not engraving. So I think that's something we need to thoughtfully think about, but definitely I will pursue it and get a new cost for that.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought I saw one of the line items that we had etching in this process. I could have sworn I read it here. The other thing was, I was gonna agree with Mr. Bass in that a lot of parents had a lot of concerns. I had 3 different parents that asked me, I think one I forwarded to you. They had concerns that they had lost it. So I hope that the mechanism is also thought up of simple signing a piece of paper and handing it over to somebody may not be the best way. And then lastly, philosophically, I hope that we're also not just buying computers so that the kids can read off of them. I know that's kind of mentioned previously, but that we're using them as the tools so that in 7 years, they are actually using the tools at the capacity of their ability as opposed to just they're just computers that sit, gather dust, type a couple Word documents and, but they're actually through their own performance and their own educational processes, they're making these tools obsolete. They're getting beyond them, right, would be the goal. I mean,
I would respectfully suggest that everyone visit Discovery Intermediate School. I don't know if you've done that or not, to sit in on the MOA class, to watch what they do. It's amazing what they do with the devices and the content that they currently have that they've built. It's a pretty fascinating to watch.
Great.
And
I
just
think it would address your question.
And just for clarity, Giselle is resending to the board both the Spectrum and the T-Mobile map, so you'll have those updated as well. Again, this is, certainly would be a work in progress. We've learned a lot over the course of the last year. Last spring, as Mr. Thorne mentioned, we issued 17,000 laptops in a real hurry. And it was, all hands on deck, and we've been very, very pleased with the rate of return and the lack of damage that was done. But certainly we found those ones and twosies, so we always will get better at our processes.
So Mr. Osceola, to answer your final question, we have put in the plan moving to a different asset management system that automates the process much more than our current Destiny system does. We use Destiny right now, but it was really designed for library books, not electronic devices. So we kind of had to fit a square peg into a round hole for that. But going to a system like Archibus will reduce that situation greatly, we believe. So thank you for bringing that up.
good, because I still have library books when I was a kid.
You should read them.
Hopefully your kids are
No.
reading them.
Now, is one-to-one including the virtual students, or is it just the ones that are enrolled?
It does include virtual.
Any further questions? Mr. Shatir and Burdette, I know we've had speaker problems back there. Have y'all been able to hear today? Okay. Is that,
I didn't hear you for sure.
do we have anything else?
Thank you for your time, I appreciate it.
Thank you, great job. Dr. Price, we're good here?
Absolutely, sir.
We will adjourn the workshop.
I apologize, I misunderstood.
That's,
We have a second presentation by Sarah and Jose about
Okay.
ESSER CARES funding update for the board.
oh, I'm sorry.
But you should also have in front of you the PowerPoint and this handout, which is the detail of our budget plan. So as everyone's probably well aware of by now, we've received the first round of the CARES Act dollars, which we are in the process of finalizing our expenditures of those this year. So what we have here on the screen in front of you, the ESSER 1, we received about 15 million. That's what we've been spending so far. Then ESSER 2 has been released. We are still in the process of trying to get through the application process and actually get that money released from the state. Hoping to have that in the next month or so prior to the end of the fiscal year. And then ESSER 3 is the American Recovery Plan dollars. That'll be considered the third round. And that's expected to be significantly more money. So what we've laid out for you here is the value of each one of the three components of the total ESSER dollars. And you can see the portion that was provided to private schools and charter schools. So the net amount for our traditional schools, as I mentioned, we've just about finished spending the first 11 million from ESSER 1. And then the next two components are what we really want to talk about today. Our plans to spend this 150 million or so dollars as we move forward through the next 3 fiscal years. So the total of ESSER 2 and 3 for traditional schools is the 152 million. And this is a very high level breakdown of what we're allocating these dollars to. And this is just staff's plan as of right now, obviously looking for board feedback today and moving forward throughout this process.
over 3 years, correct?
Yes, so this will be spent over a 3-year period.
Sarah, you've got the ELA and math and textbook adoptions in here?
Yes,
Are those
so,
not categoricals that we currently get?
They
Yes,
are,
so-
but because of the way they changed the adoption timeline and the expense of the ELA adoption in particular, because in addition to your kind of traditional textbook materials with online components and face-to-face components, there are also specific libraries for the best standards that are included in some of this. So the expense was such that it was in excess of what we had been able to save over the course of the last couple of years specifically for this adoption. If you remember, just 3 years ago, we did a math purchase, not a full math adoption, but a math purchase, because we did not feel like our current materials met the standards for algebra, geometry, and liberal arts math. So we've spent some money on those, which again kind of put us in a space where the actual cost of doing the textbook adoption for ELA and math was gonna be above and beyond what we had in the categorical. And that's one of the things that the commissioner is very aware of, and they specifically have said that you could use these dollars to supplement your categorical because they weren't gonna be able to increase the categorical in the budget.
Makes sense.
Now, on that same page though, that one-to-one technology has 25 million allocated. So that's about the total program cost to implement. So are we gonna have the ability to fully fund the one-to-one with the stimulus? Is that how we're interpreting that? I mean, like, it's a good thing. I meant that as a good thing. I'm like, wait a second, I just realized, and that's not a bad, I'm like, holy moly, I see 25 million implemented. And I remember we were talking about 19, 20 million plus or minus, some extra stuff. So we have the ability to fully fund the one-to-one
This is over the course
strictly
of
with
the
the
next,
stimulus
yes, for
dollars,
the
not
next 2.5
implementing.
years. With the plan that we know we're gonna have to build in refresh dollars.
That's some refresh in.
Yeah, because we always got annual maintenance, but it's nice to know that, wait a second, we got the ability to fully get this thing rolling with this.
And that's why, to be quite frank, that's why that is where we came up with this recommendation, because otherwise you're not gonna have $25 million just,
Now, has that been approved by the state to use it? Because we can make it as a wish list, but they can tell us, oh, we're not allowed to use that for.
technology is something that they are supporting in the allocations. So it's up to the board to give us direction, but that is what we're recommending, and the state has said we're okay.
Well, absolutely. Well, at least for me, I can't speak for everyone else. But for me, I love it, I'm excited.
John, you got a question?
Yeah, for me, a big concern, something that stands out is, we're spending $43.5 million on HVAC, and we're only spending 31 million on remediation. And believe me, I understand that people will have concerns about air quality and so on. Mr. Clinch, do you think that our AC situation is in such bad of a state that we need to spend $43.5 million to repair it while we're spending less on the actual education or the business that we are supposed to be in charge of here?
Yeah, I know when I first came to the school district in 2016, our deferred maintenance was far behind. We've made significant strides over the last 5 years. We had a dozen priority one HVAC chillers, which required daily and weekly intervention. We no longer have any priority ones. We're now in our priority 2s and 3s, so more, moving into that routine maintenance. We are getting caught up. However, there are still significant HVAC needs out there, our aging systems. According to ASHRAE, the average life cycle for an air conditioning system is 12 to 15 years. And honestly, that's doing pretty good. We've had some chillers fail in as little as 5 years. So we do have significant HVAC needs moving forward.
$43.5 million worth of repairs over the next 3 years?
Yes, sir. And that doesn't count what we're doing in our comprehensive renovations.
That's what
That's
concerns
being
me,
addressed
is that this is
separately.
ESSER money.
So, yeah, Mr. Ragway, if I can kind of answer your question from a little different perspective. So this budget was put together, if you look at it the opposite way, kind of in terms of why is remediation 31 million? We have to spend 20% on remediation. The plan that our teaching and learning team has put together for additional hours, extended school year, beefed up summer programs over the next 3 years, based on estimates of, who's gonna participate, how many hours, et cetera. This is what we've come up with. We absolutely have the ability to continue to shift throughout the time period, so if more is needed in that area, I completely agree with you that becomes the priority. At this point in time, this
Well,
was
I mean,
the
right now,
estimate
we
that
have a
came
lot
up
of
with.
schools that are underperforming, right? So, I mean, this is something that I think in the very beginning, from 35,000 feet, when we look at what our ESSER money is being used at, and the top item is not education related, seems like an oversight, when you can get so dialed into these numbers, you're maybe forgetting a little bit about what our purpose here is my feedback.
And we certainly respect that, sir, and again, that's why we're bringing this to the board. The concept was that if we could free up some capital dollars or bank some capital dollars while we were making these improvements with dollars that are available to be spent on this, it would potentially make sense in the long-term picture. As we look at impact fees potentially going down with a new impact fee study, sales tax uncertain with the quarter penny piece moving forward. So that was the concept, but we certainly respect the will of the board in this, and knowing too that as a community, people get concerned about air quality when it comes to talking about the pandemic. But we're certainly not prioritizing curriculum and teaching and learning as well.
Yeah, and I totally get switching from capital money to this so that we can spend that money however, but I mean, I would imagine, that's a large number, right? I mean, we're not in the HVAC business, right?
No, and I just want to clarify again though, just because that dollar amount is bigger does not mean that's a priority over the learning. So as much money as needed and can be put into the learning loss component is the priority.
And I don't wanna spend it just to spend it either.
Yeah, that's
It
kind
has
of,
to be purposeful too.
Terry, your light was on, are you good?
I'm counseled, thank you.
Oops, gosh.
Sarah, back to you.
So the next slide, we just kind of wanted to talk through, this is really talking about dollars that we're able to shift out of operations, capital, and our health insurance trust fund to fund out of this grant instead over the next 3 years. And in addition, some of the other things that we're able to do that we wouldn't otherwise have the funding to do. So the first section, that curriculum and support section under the general fund, we are looking for this 3-year period to be able to shift about $5 million worth of SAI expenditures that we usually pay for out of the general fund. So it's going to free up those dollars during this time period for a lot of our curriculum and educational programs. We already talked about the textbook adoptions, and then the instructional mentors that we no longer have our TSL grant, but we want to continue that program. We'll be able to fund that out of this grant, as well as the one-to-one initiative that Mr. Thorne's just gone over. So some of the dollars that we're going to be able to save in the general fund. And when you get into capital projects, again, the one-to-one devices, and the air quality improvements, and kind of back to your point, Mr. Arguello, if those dollars are available, it's just going to allow us to do more of the HVAC projects that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to do in this time frame. But again, I'll stress, this is all a moving target, and we will absolutely be able to do budget amendments and shift these funds throughout this time period, depending on what the needs of the district truly are. The last piece is the health insurance trust fund. We are also able to charge some of our COVID medical expenses to this grant. And we've estimated at this point about $2.5 million. So any of the actual healthcare expenses that have been COVID related, health claims, that would otherwise be funded out of our health trust fund, we're able to charge to the grant and save those dollars in our health trust fund.
Does it include testing?
We can charge testing there, I believe.
talked about that.
Or do we, okay. I don't think we have it in here right now, but if it's allowable and it's in that plan, then we can shift it. I think Dr. Pace is right, though. I don't think it's currently baked into our plan.
Because I guess we could reimburse, because we did a lot of testing, you know what I mean? So sometimes the grants were not just for future testing, but we can prove that, hey, we did so many tests on our employees or staff, or whatever, that if we can get reimbursed for that.
Well, we'll double check on that. I'm not sure if that was in the AQs already.
I think it was in the CARES 1 budget, Sarah, wasn't it? I know we paid for the district RN out of that to do that.
We'll go back and double check that.
Our interest in testing has declined a little bit. I've got some data that I can share in our back to school update. We're finishing up our last round for the year in the next few weeks as the school year starts to come to a close, but I can share that information with the board. This last time, I think we had 1,579 staff members and students who volunteered to be tested, and out of that, only one tested positive, so that's a good number. Sorry, it's 1,569 that we've recently tested.
Okay, so moving on to the next slide, just wanted to point you to the handouts. As I mentioned, I know it's kind of a lot of numbers on the page, but the first 3 pages are the detailed breakdown over the next 3 years of how we're spending all of the dollars related to these grants.
Mr. Arguello, you are correct. There
High
was
level.
money in that budget for etching, 44,000. Mr. Gordon missed it, but we'll come back and look for that.
I know we just kind of talked through these high-level categories on the other slide, but I wanted to give you some of the details so you guys can look at that in more detail at your convenience and let us know if you have additional thoughts or feedback. And then page 4 is the ESSER funding account structure. And this is just to give you a sense of how we account for these grants. So it's actually not 3. There are a multitude of other smaller pieces related to the CARES Act and the ESSER funds. And for those of you who may not know, I just wanted to point out that this is all tracked specifically by fund and by project number. So all of the federal dollars that we get here in the district are very tightly tied to what are they for, how much are they, what are they specifically approved for, intended for, and charging those expenditures in a way that we can easily track them because we know we're going to be audited on all of this stuff at the end of the day. Make sure everything's in compliance and squeaky clean. The following page is just a narrative for you on our grant allocation and reporting process. So I won't read to you, but you can kind of peruse that on your own time as well. Just gives you a sense of how we in the grants department and finance and budget, how we track all of this through our accounting system. In terms of going from the budget to the actual expenditure, and then how we receive the cash after the fact through a drawdown process, and ultimately the reporting component.
Bruce?
Excuse me, thank you, Chair. I went to the CTE event with Dr. Pace, and I think Arnott and Mr. Burdette. I really like that program where the adults can transfer, you know, their career basically, and they get like a fast track. And I understand that that was paid for by CARES dollars. Is there anything in this budget that reflects a continuance of that program, which I think is very important? Or are we depending on the county to contribute part of their CARES dollars to us to account for that?
I'm not sure that we can use these dollars for K-12. Sarah, please correct me if I'm wrong. There are, however, Mr. Arnott is shaking his head, there are, however, some adult funds available through CareerSource and post-secondary, and then obviously we were very excited about the county's allocation of those dollars to support that program. And according to Commissioner Arrington, they feel like they want to continue to do that. They're funding not only programs at OTEC for adults, but they've also been doing some work on short-term credentialing projects at Valencia as well. But it's basically about trying to get the adults in our community back to work because unemployment has been such a challenge for our county. Mr. Arnott, anything else you could clarify?
And like, is it addressed in this budget, or is it something that's separate to this?
No, it's a separate thing. Those were paid for out of continuing workforce education dollars. We have to make a profit on those particular things, which we did. with that money. But there is this has been proposed by the governor's office, $100 million that's coming down in the states, $25 million for adults, and they even mentioned adult ed, and $75 million for kids, K-12 students, to take on some more trainings later on. Not sure what that money looks like, not sure if it's even in the budget yet, but I think that was some of the CARES dollars that he was gonna use in order to funnel through to us here locally. So we're pretty excited that that's gonna happen. But yeah, we're gonna continue them, absolutely. We're gonna keep it as low cost as we can for the students. And yeah, Career Source, especially if they're under the age of 24, can pay for a lot of that training. We are an approved educational partner with them to pay for those things. And we're always looking for other monies as well.
Sarah, are you,
That's all I have. If you have any other questions.
board, anything else, Dr. Pace? Once again, is this it?
This is it, sir, I apologize.
That's okay. Well, I thought there was something else, man.
This is truly it,
Got quiet on me.
unless there's other questions.
But we will adjourn then until, for the next 23 minutes for the regular scheduled school board meeting. See everybody in a few.